Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am, of course, Josh Bycer, and we have another great cast lineup with you tonight. My guest is from the uh, Studio Solution. Hopefully, I butchered that too badly. And they are working on the upcoming VR game Gravitational, which is an adventure puzzle game, and we're going to be talking with one of the developers about the design of it, as well as kind of what it means to work in VR. So, please welcome Hugo Campos. How are you doing?
Hey Josh, how are you doing? I'm fine, thank you. You said fine, the name, Studica Solutions. And we are also known as Electric Monkeys. We have two names. It's a long story, but you can say that too.
Okay, great. It is a pleasure to have you on tonight, Hugo. And it's going to be interesting to talk about gravitational because we were talking about this through email, and there's some very interesting aspects of it. But get things started for our interview, could you talk a little bit about your background? And for the people listening, what is gravitational all about?
Yeah, sure. To know a little about myself, I graduated in game design here in Brazil in 2013, and I've been working on games since. I worked on different companies. I've worked for games for Cartoon Network, and on 2016 I started our own company. I founded Electric Monkeys among other partners I have. We've been working on games like Gravity Heroes is one game that we released this year. Is actually our first game for PC and console that we released, and we also work on mobile games. We are trying to find all platforms. We are risking in different areas. I can say that I have a lot of experience of each. Not a lot, a little experience of each, but it's a great experience to work all these platforms. Uh, we started working on Gravitational is 2 years now, and Gravitational. If you, I know you guys heard of it, but Gravitational is a VR game. So it's our first VR game, and Gravitational, you assume the role of Sebastian. He is a scientist, and the interesting thing is that he uses a wheelchair. So uh, in this game, it's a futuristic game, and you need to solve a crisis on this corporation. It's called GravCorp. It's like a corporation that creates gravitational solutions for their customers, and you as Sebastian is the lead developer of these technologies. But as in all games, there is a conflict, right? So in this game, we have a core, a gravitational core that is collapsing, and it's your job to fix this core. It's like Portal, but instead of portals, we have gravitational puzzles. So that's why it's called gravitational.
So you said that Gravitational is your company's first VR game. I guess what attracted you and your team to work in VR for Gravitational as opposed to just like a traditional platform?
Yeah. When VR technologies started emerging, I got this idea that we needed to create something really different. This idea came in 2013, but the opportunity to develop it just came. So the idea was to create something completely different, working on the feeling of the players. And the first idea was to create an environment, a weightless environment. You have no gravity, and you need to float around just like an astronaut, grabbing on things and trying to move with your hands, right? That was the first idea we had. And when we started looking forward on the game, we noticed that actually the players usually plays these kind of games sitting on a chair, and they don't use much their legs, right? So it made a lot of sense to create Sebastian. It's a character that needs a wheelchair, and he needs to float around in this experience. So that's why we created a VR game, because it only makes sense on the VR environment. and this embodiment of the player in a character that needs a wheelchair and this kind of stuff also made a lot of sense for us, and that's why we decided to create the game as it is now.
Now, for people listening to us, like recorder right now, we don't normally do a lot in terms of VR here on Game Wisdom, just because I don't have the setup for it. But for developers listening to us right now, was there anything like interesting or a specific challenge that your studio ran into with developing for VR for the first time?
There is a lot of challenges because first thing you have the objects. You can say that usually when you have let's say normal game design in a platform video game or console, so the current normally you can control all aspects of the game. You can control how the character moves is under your control as a programmer. But when you have a character in VR, suddenly there are objects there that you have no control, right? So there's the position of the player, where he puts his hands on, and this is the first challenge. You need to take care of these objects and know what to do with these movements, what they mean, and that's the first challenge for us. It was to like what to do with this object that represents the headset and the hands of the player. And as this was the first challenge, other challenges as well came because how can I translate the physics from the real world to the virtual worlds, right? So that's another challenge. And our game is based on physics. Our game needs to have a good feeling. And suddenly there is a third problem that's a really big problem, that is motion sickness. You cannot just move the player. If you move the player, you have forced camera movement. He's going to be sick. He's going to feel bad, and this is really the challenge we have on VR development. I can summarize for you, and you need to take care of this before we start the game. This is our first VR game, so we discovered some of these issues too late on the game, and
Mhm.
we needed to change our design and change how things worked because we cannot make the player feel bad just for being in the game. And this is really easy on VR, the VR platform. So my suggestion for everyone that's going to develop a game on VR is the first thing you need to think and how that environment is good for the player and how to make the player feels good. So that's the biggest challenge, in my opinion, on the VR platforms.
All right. And yeah, like motion sickness is definitely a major factor. It's one of the reasons why I don't typically do things in VR. Because when I was growing up, I had like horrible like I couldn't play like, the Game Boy because of like the low lighting was enough to cause me to get a migraine. So I'm just like really afraid of doing anything in VR with the camera controls and just just getting completely messed up with that.
Yeah, I get it. And the main problem is forced camera movement, and too much turnarounds and movement causes this kind of sickness. And this is all related to the vision and how the players feel. Because if you see yourself moving and your body cannot feel that, that's where the motion sickness is. So, as you said, a low light environment, you're like forcing your vision, and that's the problem. Our vision is really limited. We cannot work around this, so we need to work around on the game and try to make us bearable possible.
Hmm. Yeah, and when you're trying to like get into like the VR space, I think another thing I wanted to ask you about is the actual like puzzle design and kind of like the general gameplay loop of Gravitational. Because obviously working in VR does give you specific advantages with designing like how you want buildings around because the player's going to be actively looking around. Like you're not dealing with an outside 3D camera. So how did kind of VR influence the level design or the actual gameplay of the game?
Actually, that's a great question because there is a lot of problems we had, and this is
Hmm.
related to the camera position. And let's say like this: if you guys played the first Resident Evil, the first ones you have the fixed camera, so you could set up things in a way you can see the objective clearly. But on the new Resident Evil, you have like a free camera, so it's a little harder to make things clear for the player where he needs to go and what can he explore. And when you come to VR, so you have the same problem because each player has a different height and different point of view because you cannot control where he's going to be, how high he's going to be. So let's say if a very short person is playing the game, he might not see some hints I put on certain positions, and these hints might be important. So we needed to create something always taking this in consideration. It was always on our mind that maybe uh, the players cannot see everything the way we see that. So we tried to create the puzzles in a way that it's less important your position, more important where things are on the design. So for example, this game we have challenges on the game. You need to reach come from point A to reach point B. So you need to create a path to reach there. So you are on a wheelchair. You cannot use stairs. You can go only on a plane. Let's say that, and you need to construct your path to reach the other position. So you are always looking down on the game. So if you see the puzzles, you are always looking down, creating your own path. There is an exception because we have gravitational fields, and you float around these fields, and you need to grab on bars and you add force to yourself. You need to move your arms so you can push yourself to the other positions in a non gravity environment. So there is the only exception because you can go up on this scenario. So we have this kind of design because we cannot actually work on things too high because players are seated. The players are sitting on their chair, and maybe they cannot see over like a table that is too high because maybe it's a kid working. All right, so there's this kind of stuff. There's other stuff you must pay attention to. For example, I said on these gravitational fields, we have these bars, and sometimes you can just grab on a bar, grabbing another bar, and go floating and always holding something. There are players that have a really short arm. That's my example. I have a really short arm. So depending on the distance between these bars, I couldn't complete the level, and other players could. So we needed to create a distance where it made a lot of sense for both of the players, and always counting that he could float around. So these are the kind of stuff you only are going to see on VR because, as I said on the beginning of our conversation, you have these three objects on your game that have completely free will because it's ahead of the player and his hands, and you cannot know where he can reach and where he cannot because it depends on the body of the player. So that's the main issue on designing puzzles, designing the level design of the game. This kind of stuff, you need to pay attention a lot because it's really easy for us to lose some information because of the player's stature or something like that.
That's very interesting about kind of the physical dimensions of somebody actually impacting the level design. Because again, like for people who don't develop in VR, we're dealing with just the in-game avatar. So it's very fascinating to like think about, how somebody's height can completely mess with your actual puzzle flow.
Yeah, it's true, and we have the wheelchair too on our game. So the distance from your hand to the wheelchair is really important too. People that uses wheelchair on daily basis, each wheelchair has a different setting for specifically for this person, right? and it's really hard for her to work on that because we don't know what's the best setup, and it is we don't have a lot of 3D models to use as a wheelchair, and we cannot create too much configuration on the
Hmm.
wheelchair so players can set this up. So we needed to work around that on the player scale based on his height and this kind of stuff. So there is a really difficult because let's say I create a character that is 2 meters. We use meters here. I don't know if you guys use theirs, but basically this almost the size of a door. Let's say that, and he's too high for some players because I need to take in consideration what's the average height a person have. Even though if you use the average height, there is some people that's going to be taller and smaller. So the smaller people are going to feel like giants, and the taller people will feel like they are dwarfs. So this is a problem because it's a matter of the point of view you have your whole life, and it suddenly this changed in a VR game, and this is going to feel weird and probably make also contribute to motion sickness. So it's really hard to determine this on VR games.
Mm. Yep. Now, one thing that we didn't discuss yet that I want to bring up is having your main character be in a wheelchair. Because we really don't see a lot of games that feature people who are disabled or handicapped. A lot of titles that go this route, that they introduce a character with some kind of issue, it's often, immediately resolved or cured within like the first cutscene or even like the first 5 minutes of play. So, what was the decision to base your protagonist in Gravitational on somebody who is in a wheelchair, which I assume is going to be for the majority of the game?
Yes, you are correct on that. There is a lot of issues to create a character that's completely different from what you're used to, and our decision was based on the player embodiment. How so? If you look at your controllers on a VR setup, you only have controls for your head and your hands, right? So you don't use your legs, your foot, not on all games. Basically, that's the default setup. And we were thinking it won't make a lot of sense if the character can like just walk, and you
Hmm.
are trying to create this immersion, and the player is going to play this on their chair, and they're not to walk around. So we tried to create something that made a lot of sense with the player position. Also, this was the first consideration. Also, as you said, it's really hard to have a character in wheelchairs, and this is permanent on the game. You're not going to solve that. You need to use the wheelchair, right? So there is this too. It's completely different. And there's the third motivation we have is that to show people that because they have a vision sometimes that the wheelchair is like a prison. You are like you cannot leave there that place, so it might be a prison. It's restricting your movement, but actually, it's the opposite. For people that uses a wheelchair, they need to use a wheelchair. This is actually a tool of freedom because now they can reach other places. Now they can walk around and go in other places. And we wanted to show people that this is not a bad thing. This is just a different thing, and we could be more sympathetic with what's happening with these people. So if you walk around a park and you take a bus, go to a store, you're going to notice some patterns that doesn't fit for people that needs a wheelchair. So this is the third motivation we have is to show people that the world needs to have accessibility. So the first, I like to say that the problem in our game is accessibility because you need to reach other places. So a lot of games has these same issues. Like let's say Portal. Portal is a game where your main problem is accessibility. You need to use portals to find a path to generate access. So in our game, it's not no different. You need to find access to other positions in the game, in this world, and we'd like to players to have this as a default state on their mind, because when you go to the real world with this in mind, you are going to find patterns. You're going to see that, well, that's a bad thing here, because people that needs a wheelchair cannot came here. They cannot come here. So that's our third motivation, to keep Sebastian as a wheelchair user, and we think this is a good thing. We think that it's a different point of view, a different experience, and that's what games is all about. And we create different experiences and show different points of view to the players.
Yep. And it is something that we really haven't seen a lot of developers really tackle. And it is, again, like a very important point about showing that just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean that, you can't do anything. Or a lot of games will, cure you of it. And then, if your background is that you're paralyzed, but now you're, running and double jumping around, that kind of, limits and downplays that whole story of the character.
Yeah, I get it. And it's really difficult to create something like this, because for us as game developers, we wanted to create a game. This is not an educational game. So we wanted to create a game for entertainment, and this is an issue that exists. This is something that is out there on the world, and why we wouldn't use that. So it made sense on the design, it made sense on the story of the game. So why not to use that? So that's why we created this. It's make a lot of sense, and people are supporting us on this decision, and we are really happy to create this. I'm sure the game developers that are hearing this now, they can take some risks like this, because this is the real world, and we want to create something that makes sense. This makes sense this makes a lot of sense for us. So that's why we created this, and it's working for us.
Yep. And like with the like getting back to kind of like more like the puzzle design and as well as with VR, you mentioned a few minutes ago, of course, about having the limitations in terms of like showing footage or showing clues around. In terms of the actual puzzles themselves, for people listening, could you describe a little bit of like kind of like what is the puzzle philosophy of Gravitational? Like what is somebody going to be doing in the game? And again, you don't have to go into spoiler detail or reveal any
No problem.
solutions.
Yeah. So puzzles, as I said, you need to create a path. There is this core that is collapsing on the company, and it destroys a lot of the paths you need to reach that. So in order to reach that, you need to go through a lot of destroyed places. So there is this technology that creates path where it's not. So we call these gravitational cubes. Each cube has a different mechanic. So some cubes you can just place there in a wall, right? So if you place this in a hole, you can fill the hole and you can go through this path. So this is the first puzzle. The first puzzle is you need to create a path. And how I'm going to do that with the resources I'm given. And there is a lot of resources that players need to think and they need to use correctly. Uh, Second resource is the gravitational field, where it's just your skills, right? You need to float around using your own strength to pull yourself from the wall and go to another place floating. So it's more like skill. You need to, but it's not too much, because it could be really hard to create something uh, that doesn't cause motion sickness and also has a good variability of gameplay. So that's the second puzzle, and that's the third puzzle, where you just standing in front of a computer, and there is this energy puzzle where you need to distribute the energy correctly in order to open the doors. So that's the core of our game. That's the three challenges we basically have, and we are exploring these challenges from beginning to the end of the game. So there's going to be harder puzzles in the ending. And we are also introducing new resources for the player during the game in order for him to create a path. So basically, that's what the game challenges are. And create a path, you get float around and solve energy issues.
Right. And I guess as another question about like the puzzle design, especially how this applies to VR. When I've spoken to a lot of developers about either making like adventure games or puzzle games, we've gone into a lot of discussion about kind of like the puzzle difficulty of the game. And especially with how much the market has changed over like the last 5 or 6 years. With Gravitational, and again, especially with the fact that this is in VR, what kind of, I guess, difficulty curve were you aiming for? Like, is this a game meant for, expert puzzle solvers, casuals, or somewhere in between?
Um, I think it's somewhere in between. Yeah. On the beginning of the game, it's really easy to solve the puzzles. We have extra resources for the player. On the middle to the ending of the game, we have different puzzles, and it's not that hard because there is more than one solution. So this is something that we try to work so players can feel they found their own solution to that puzzle. So when testing with different players, there were solutions that we didn't even think of, and that's what I think it's cool because players can feel like they have the power to solve their own way that kind of puzzle. And I think this is really valuable for players, even though sometimes might be difficult if they find their own solution to a problem. I think it's really rewarding for the game. So we try to create some balance between easier puzzles and harder ones, and not to create an impossible puzzle. You need to be Magnus Carlsen, chess champion to solve. So uh, you can definitely have fun solving the puzzles, and it's really rewarding when you find the solution.
And with kind of like the balance that you and your team sub for Gravitational, I guess one another question I really like to ask developers who work on puzzles is how did you kind of decide when a puzzle's done? Especially given the VRs with the actual considerations of VR, like what was kind of like the determination to say that okay, this is done, we've got this as good as it's going to be, let's move on to the next one, or like when was something considered too hard or too easy?
Yeah, so there is some. It depends a lot of the type of puzzle you're creating, right? So we have a lot of different games like Baba is You that's really hard, but you have different solutions, and I guess it's really hard to make the design for this game. But our game has a really interesting way to solve because you just need to create a path, right? So first thing is you need to discover resources. How much resources we need to solve this puzzle. So the higher the number of resources, most difficult is going to be, right? So in our case, and also there is the complexity of the resource you have, right? So let's say you have a resource that's really difficult to use, but it is necessary. Automatically, it's not going to be an easy puzzle because players need to think in a smart way to use that resource, right? So what we do at first, we use pen and paper. So we decided the puzzles on pen and paper, and we created the puzzles and what makes sense at first. And after testing it, the first time, we found if the puzzle was too hard or too easy. The problem is, if you know the solution to your puzzle, you cannot test it, right? So that's the problem on creating puzzles. So we needed always to test with other folks and people that help us with that in order to see if the puzzle made they made sense or not. So I think it's difficult to balance things and to determine if that puzzle is good enough. So I would say you can set up some rules. The first thing is what are the rules that define my puzzle, and what are the difficult of the resources, and how hard it is to use them. And after that, you need to test, because if you don't test, you will never have an answer if that puzzle is actually easy or not. So it can be as easy as a uh, baby toy that you have a circle. You have a ball in your hand, so you know you need to put the ball on the circle, and it's going to be solved. We cannot create something like that, and we can only see that if you give it in the hands of a player, right? So if he doesn't play the game, if you don't give your game to your player, you are never going to know if the game is well balanced. You need to test with these players.
Trying to think if there is anything else in terms of questions about gravitational. Anything regarding the game design or development that we haven't touched on that you would like to bring up, Hugo?
Let me think a little. Um, we have some extra resources in the game that there's a different character. He's not there. Actually, you just listen to his. It's like a voicemail he lets on places on the words. So this is important stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you always give players a hint, right? Even if this is a like story hint, or if this is a puzzle hint, something like that. It's important that in a puzzle game, the players think they found the solution to the puzzle, right? So it's sometimes the player is going to get stuck, and you must give him the resource to understand how to surpass this. So it's important to let them think they found the solution instead of you gave them the solution. So this is something really important on puzzle games. I would say I know we're talking about puzzles, but I would give this hint for game designers out there. You not necessarily need to give the player the solution if you can make him think he found out the solution himself. So it's the best way to give players the answer for a puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and trying to get that right is very tricky for a lot of developers because you never know what the consumer's like level or mastery of puzzle design can be. Like there are some games where people are just like it's just completely easy, and you have someone else who's just stuck at the same puzzle for like 2 to 3 hours at one time.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It can be tricky, but you can work around this. And I definitely would say you need to test with people. Puzzle games are like this. You need to test and see how people are receiving the game. Of course, there are those who can master your game like in 5 seconds, and there are those that needs a lot of information and tips for them to solve the game. So you need to find which one is your player and create things for them.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess to begin to wrap things up for our interview today, I guess one question I wanted to ask you, Hugo: do
Yeah.
you see like you and your team continue to work in VR in the future?
Yes, definitely. And of course, the game is not launched yet. It's going to be released next month or so. We
Mm-hmm.
have some problems with porting to PlayStation, so we need to fix this first. But we definitely see ourselves creating games for the VR platform. The thing is, it's your audience is not going to be too much as other types of games, right? So we don't have the same potential. But this audience, they are really seeking for games.
Mm-hmm.
So they are really trying to find new games because there is not much developers actually creating games for VR. So I think we will keep creating these VR games because we think there is not much developers doing this, and people that have a VR headset are looking for new games, and we found this as a niche. I don't know how to say this in English. It's a public that we need to uh, we need to create content for them. They are looking for content, and there's just a few content there. In as our games, this gravitational game is not that long, so there is a lot of space for this type of game. Also, I would suggest people to work on the platforms like Viveport Infinity, because it's really great, because this is the signature monthly paid for the players, and they are always finding new games, and this is a really great platform for both players and developers. So I would encourage people to look on these kind of tools and platforms, because I think there's a lot of space for new games, and these players they they are really looking for new content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's something that I've heard from other developers, or I've spoken to a few people about, kind of like the lack of a lot of like interesting and unique games in the VR space. And it's something that I think has led to a lot of people having that argument over, what is VR's viability when it comes to the game industry? Because, like you said, I'm sure for the people listening, like when we think about kind of like high end, amazing VR games, that list is very short. Like I'm sure everyone listening here will just immediately gravitate towards, Half Life Alyx. No pun intended towards Gravitational there. But it is hard to find games that kind of can compete in this space, as opposed to having so many games on traditional console or PC.
Yeah, that's really true, and I hope I actually I expect that this is going to change in the future. For even for players that finds the headset too expensive, I think we are going to find new solutions for VR. Also, the players that think there is not enough content there, for sure, I see there are a lot of companies and a lot of game designers creating new ideas for VR, and this is really new. This is really new, and I think on the near future we are going to see really innovative games. There's a lot of new problems that raises with this technology. So these problems are going to be solved really soon. So the best thing like we can do is support the VR platform, because I think this is a really great potential area of source of entertainment and source of business for game designers as well. So yes, I would definitely keep going with VR. Gravitational is only our first game. For sure, there's a second one. Actually, I'm also currently planning a second game for VR, and I'm sure that there is going to be a lot of space for everyone.
Right. So I think with that, I am just about out of questions for our chat. So I guess to end things on, or to begin to end things on, for people listening, you said that Gravitational is going to be coming out in about a month. So we are recording this just at the beginning of July. So looking at August. I guess for people listening, what platforms are you aiming for?
Currently, we're going to release the game on Steam and Viveport and PlayStation VR. These are the platforms we are aiming to. We don't have the game available for Oculus Rift yet, unfortunately, but I think it's just a matter of time. And of course, the reception of players is going to make a lot of difference too. If the game is well received from the players, so by the players, it's going to be really easy for me to expand the game for other platforms and reach even more people.
Great. And I guess my final question for you for tonight then is, do you have anything you'd like to say to any fans, any developers, anything to end the cast on?
Well, let's see. Please, I would say people to follow us on our social media and give us feedback, because this is the most important thing we can have, is the feedback you guys have. things you would like to see, things that you think it's great for the game, and those that are not great as well. So I think this is some really valuable for us. You can find us as looking for Electric Monkeys. Currently, this is going to be our second game we're going to release. So we're a very small company. We're very new to this industry. But if you guys have any questions, please reach me. I'm Unity developer. I'm also a Unity instructor. So if you have any questions related to technology as well, how to do something, you can reach me and ask me anything. I'll do my best to answer your questions and give you the best information I can about the game and about game development, all this kind of stuff. That's, I think, what I would like to say to your guys.
All right, and in terms of social media, do you have any you like to mention for people to follow you on?
You can you can follow me. It's using my name. I am on almost all platforms, but I would say that the best ones you can find me is looking for Electric Monkeys, and maybe using my name too. So we can discuss that. Gravitational have a Discord channel as well, so you can find the link on these platforms as well. And I'm there if you have any questions. You want to reach me and talk to me. I'm really open to this kind of stuff.
All right. So I think with that, we will wrap things up for this week's cast. Hugo, it was a pleasure chatting with you today. Best of luck with the release of Gravitational. And whatever you have something coming out in the future, it'll be great to catch up with you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you a lot for the reception. And best luck for you and the guys listening to this. Thank you a lot for your support, and thank you for calling me in this time. It's been great talking to you. Thank you a lot.
All right, sounds good. So, with that said, for those of you listening, we're going to wrap up this week's cast here. As always, if you are a developer working on a title or somebody just interested in talking game design, we're always looking for guests for our live and recorded talks. If you are interested, please reach out. Be sure to check out our Discord and Patreon link down below and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, whereas they are in science of games. Until next time, take care.